Hi everybody, my name is Crystal and in this video I am going to be taking this solid maple dresser and turning it into a faux metal finish. This dresser is super high quality, it's solid maple, all wood. It's a really nice piece. It's just really outdated. It's not something I think everybody is looking for. Other than quality, it's just kind of blah. So I start out with sanding with my orbital sander and I'm using an 80 grit sandpaper. This piece is super glossy, so I just want to make sure I scuff this up enough so I get that glossy finish off, so that way I ensure my paint is going to adhere properly. I am using this Rustoleum brand milk paint for this piece. I think this is a really fun color. It's called Venetian yellow. Milk paint is kind of a little bit of a learning curve to it. This one is pre-mixed. There are other brands that are available that you have to mix them. I actually prefer the pre-mixed kind versus the powder form where you have to add water. I just feel like it's really hard to get the correct consistency and it can be hard to get like all the lumps out versus just the convenience of opening up the can and having like the perfect consistency already pre-mixed for you. And as I said, it's sort of transparent. It's kind of thinner in consistency. So if you want to paint the first layer of paint in a different color, you can easily achieve a layered look by applying this milk paint on top of it and having that color pull through beneath the milk paint. I really struggled with the decoupage part on this piece. I could not figure out for the life of me if I wanted to only do the top drawer, if I wanted to include the decoupage on all three of my drawers. I spent hours just deciding and trying to get a game plan going. I had decoupage paper taped up all over on these drawers, taking pictures, trying to get an idea of what it would look like. Finally, I decided I would just do the top drawer. And then as far as it went, trying to cut the paper and fit it on the top drawer, that was a whole nother story right there. But I first started out just tracing the top drawer and cutting it that way, which I should have just in the first place got out my handy dandy cutting mat, my rotary cutter, and my acrylic ruler and just measured the drawer and cut it out that way. But yeah, I didn't do that. Even though I didn't decoupage the bottom two drawers, I'm going to go ahead and show you anyways how much easier my life would have been if I just went ahead and measured the little panel parts on the drawers and used my acrylic ruler, my cutting mat, and my rotary cutter to simply and easily get the perfect lines, the perfect cuts on my decoupage paper. Oh, and I got this awesome wrapping paper off of Zazzle.com. Zazzle.com. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I cut up all these pieces of decoupage paper that I didn't even use anyway. I'm just taking my acrylic ruler and I'm using that as a straight edge. And it's nice because you can see through it, it's clear. So you can line everything up perfectly. So I measured, I actually just used the pieces I traced out and I used it as a template. So I kind of knew um, the inches that I needed and my measurements and everything like that. And I lined it all up onto my cutting mat. I took my rotary cutter and just made a nice clean cut. Seriously though, see how much easier that would have been if I would have just done that in the first place? If you do not have one of these, I highly recommend investing in all of these little tools because they're not just great for sewing, but they're great for stuff like this. Lining drawers, it is so easy because you get like the perfect cuts. They're great. I love these things. I use them all the time and not just for sewing. I brought the whole thing in, well, not by myself. I had my husband bring it in with me because this thing is extremely heavy. It looks small, but it is mighty. So I am finishing putting on another layer of paint onto the sides. Altogether, I have like 3 to 4 layers of paint on this. The next part I did was add my decoupage paper with I'm using a soft matte gel. It's just like Mod Podge, same thing basically. I like this a little bit better. It is more expensive, but I mean basically it does the same thing. I'm using a chip brush. I'm putting on the soft matte gel and then I'm laying down my decoupage paper. I had to pull it up a couple of times because I didn't have my matte gel thick enough, so it wasn't like sticking. You just need to be really careful if you need to pull up your paper to do this. This paper is a little bit more on the thicker side, so I wasn't as concerned pulling it up, but you still need to be careful and gentle because it will rip and tear if you are not gentle enough with it. And then I'm pulling up the corners and I'm adding a little bit more of this soft matte gel to kind of just glue the corners down and make sure everything is kind of held in place good. Then just simply take your hand or I don't know, maybe a credit card or something like that. I usually just use my hand and just smooth everything out and try and get all the bubbles out. On this one, I wasn't super concerned about bubbles or wrinkles or anything like that because I kind of wanted that effect anyways. I was kind of going for, you know, something that was distressed or decrepit or, you know, not perfect. Put the drawer in, stand back, and admire. This part was fun. I love doing any type of faux effect, especially the rusted metal or where I can just get creative and get my hands dirty. And I totally got my hands dirty and my feet and my floor and everything really. I'm using a brown metallic glaze. I am using a rust pigment powder and 2 artist brushes. One that I'm using is like a natural bristle brush. So first thing I am doing is I am taking my softer bristled brush and I'm taking my glaze and I'm wiping on my glaze and I'm using my finger and I'm kind of like blending it in and rubbing it in with my finger. Then I'm coming back with my natural bristle brush, which has more coarser bristles in it, and I'm tapping in the rust pigment, which is a powder. Because the glaze is still wet, the pigment powder is sticking to the glaze really easily. But you can also take the rust pigment and like I'm doing, I'm just taking it and wiping it on and dabbing it on and just kind of rubbing it in with my finger to make it look a little bit dirty, a little bit rusty, a little bit decrepit. This is really fun. This is so much fun. I love doing this. This is pretty much the only time I use my middle finger, you guys. Like, I don't use it very often. lot of that rust pigment powder that I was tapping on fell down around the base of the dresser. So I'm just dipping my finger in it, tapping my finger in it, whatever, and just kind of tapping it on the dresser. I'm taking my finger and I'm going on certain areas and I'm pulling downward. In my head, I'm imagining like water dripping down and rust forming from the water, just constantly dripping in a downward motion. So I'm pulling my finger down and making that rust pigment and that metallic glaze pull downward like it had been dripping for years. I just continued this on the whole dresser, on the tops and on the sides. I did the sides a little bit more heavily with my drips, just kind of where I thought that water would be constantly streaming down. My next step was adding rivets. I am using embroidery tacks and a wire cutter. I am cutting off the nail part of the embroidery tag with my wire cutter because these are really hard to hammer in. This is solid wood, so I have tried this before and they just end up bending and just making like little holes and indents in the piece. So I have started just by cutting them off, and I'm using this E6000 glue and I'm gluing them on with the glue. Once I get them in place, there's still like a little nub left on the back from where I used the wire cutters to cut off the nail part. So I'm just taking my hammer and I'm tapping that into place so that way it sits level and flat on the wood surface. I set my handles in place and then I just went back with one of my artist brush and I kind of just touched up little areas and I added a little bit more rust and a little bit more of the glaze in different areas where I thought it needed to be darkened or needed just a little bit more. There was like a little gap between the drawers where I wanted to put some more of my rivets. So I spent a lot of time measuring. I mean, a lot of time measure twice, cut once, or whatever they say. Well, I didn't want to put the glue on, hammer everything in, and nothing lined up or matched. I think it was about 5¼ inches in between all of the rivets that I measured. And then when I'm putting my handles on, I am taking my drill and a really teeny tiny drill bit because these screws are tiny on these drawer pulls, and I'm making a little hole and pre-drilling my hole before I put in my screws. These screws really, they're not the best. They kind of suck. They strip really easy, and I just want to make my life a little less hard to put them on. I'm using a little teeny tiny screwdriver, screwing everything in. I also spent a ton of time measuring my drawer pulls, making sure everything was lined up with my drawer pulls too. This is something I usually have my husband do because like if something gets screwed up, I can blame him. This is so scary to me. I always am so afraid when I have to drill holes and put on the drawer pulls that things are not going to line up perfectly. So I usually ask him for his help, but he wasn't here on this day. So same thing. I'm using the E6000 glue and I'm gluing on all of my rivets. This stuff is really amazing. I love this glue, you guys, but make sure you're always wearing gloves. I have gotten this stuff on my hands before, and it's literally months before I could get it off. And also, I'm pretty sure it's extremely toxic. So it's important to wear gloves and protect yourself, protect your hands. Probably should be wearing a respiratory mask as well, because it stinks. The stuff smells so bad, but it is like the strongest stuff out there. It's like industrial strength glue. Well, I shouldn't say the strongest, but it probably is one of the strongest. Then I'm using a workable fixative, and this kind of just sets and holds and I guess maybe seals the rust pigment. So when I go to apply my sealer onto it, it's not going to like spread or, move or anything like that. A lot of times, this is something that is used for people who work with like charcoals and chalks and stuff like that. And make sure you do this outside. Don't be like Crystal. Don't do this inside. It smells, it stinks. That was not a good idea. And I still am waiting for the other two drawer pulls to come in, which I got off of Amazon, by the way. So I had enough to do what you see here in this picture, and then I had to order more. I'm using Miss Lillian's Lackluster Sealant. I started using a paintbrush because I did not have very much left. I prefer using the sponge applicator, but I feel like I might waste a little bit more when I'm using the sponge applicator because it kind of absorbs into the applicator, but it leaves such a better smooth finish than it was when I was using my paintbrush. So I went and I got my sponge applicator and I used my sponge applicator instead of a paintbrush. And that was pretty much it, you guys. I just had to wait for those pulls to come and finish it. But let's take a look at the before and after. And you guys, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like and comment as well. I love reading your guys' comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. And thank you so much for watching it. I truly appreciate it. I hope y'all have a great day.